In 2025, two cases gripped the world with their eerie details and shocking conclusions. Both began as simple investigations, but grew into dark journeys through obsession, deception, and hidden evil. The first case started in a small town in Washington, where a respected school teacher named Claire Donovan suddenly vanished after leaving work one evening. Her car was found parked neatly near a forest trail, the keys still in the ignition, and her belongings untouched. Locals searched for days, but there was no trace of her. What puzzled investigators most was a strange symbol carved into the dirt near her car, shaped like an eye within a circle. Weeks passed with no progress until a park ranger discovered a hidden underground shelter deep in the woods. Inside were dozens of personal items, wallets, phones, and jewelry, belonging to missing people reported over several years. A single locked door at the back of the shelter revealed a chilling discovery. Claire was found alive, weak but conscious, surrounded by notebooks filled with the writings of her captor. The notes described a man obsessed with protecting people from the dangers of society by keeping them underground. Fingerprints matched a retired forest officer named Patrick Hale, who had vanished after being dismissed for misconduct 10 years earlier. He had lived in isolation, building his underground prison beneath the forest. Claire's escape finally exposed a decade of disappearances that had been dismissed as lost hikers. Hale was captured hiding in a nearby cabin, having survived unnoticed for years among the trees. The second case began in Los Angeles, when a series of mysterious packages arrived at local news stations. Each package contained a single photograph of a smiling person with the words, "Final Portrait," written on the back. Every individual in the photos was later identified as someone reported missing within the previous 6 months. Detectives traced the printing style of the photos to a rare film developer used by only a handful of professionals. One of them was a well-known fashion photographer named Julian Crest, who had recently withdrawn from public life after a scandal involving his models. Police obtained a warrant to search Crest's abandoned studio, where they discovered a hidden room behind a mirrored wall. The space was set up like a photography set, with mannequins dressed in clothing identical to the victims' outfits from the photos. In one corner was a large freezer, and inside were the remains of several victims preserved with chemical agents. Crest had created a ritual in which he captured what he called the perfection of a final moment. His journals detailed his belief that true art required real fear to produce emotion. Investigators also found that Crest had been uploading edited versions of the photos to a secret online gallery for wealthy collectors. Both cases shocked the world in their own ways. Claire Donovan's survival revealed how easily evil could hide in plain sight, while the Final Portrait murders exposed the darkness behind fame and art. In 2025, justice was served, but the haunting details of these crimes reminded everyone that beneath the surface of ordinary life, horror can quietly grow unnoticed. During their search, investigators discovered a narrow door behind a bookshelf in the basement of the apartment complex. At first, it appeared to be part of the wall, coated with the same faded paint and hidden behind layers of dust. When they pushed it open, a stale, heavy air escaped, carrying the scent of damp concrete and something faintly metallic. The passage was narrow, forcing the officers to move single file down a creaking wooden staircase that led deeper underground than the building AS blueprints had ever shown. What they found at the bottom felt more like a forgotten bunker than part of an apartment complex. The small room beyond was completely soundproofed. Every surface, walls, ceiling, even the floor, had been lined with thick foam and rubber padding. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, casting a dull yellow light that flickered every few seconds. Against the walls were piles of discarded clothing, all carefully folded but covered in dust, as if stored there for years. Most pieces looked ordinary, winter coats, scarves, and faded t-shirts. But as the investigators looked closer, they began noticing small tags attached to some items, each labeled with a first name and a date. Some of the dates went back more than a decade. On one table lay dozens of old Polaroid photos, arranged in neat rows. Each photo captured a different person inside one of the building's apartments. Some were candid shots, tenants cooking, reading, or watching television, taken from strange angles, as if the photographer had been standing just out of sight. Others showed people sleeping in their beds, completely unaware they were being watched. The photos appeared to follow a timeline, showing how tenants came and went over the years. Near the end of the row was a photo that froze the investigators in disbelief. Mia Lang, lying peacefully in her bed, taken only days before she was reported missing. The team documented everything, photographing every inch of the hidden room. They found evidence of recent activity: food wrappers, a portable stove, and a small mattress tucked in a corner, suggesting someone had been living there secretly. There were also dozens of empty film canisters and a small collection of keys marked with apartment numbers. It became clear that whoever had been down there had unlimited access to the entire building. Even more disturbing was the realization that this person had been moving freely among the tenants, slipping in and out unnoticed for years. When forensic teams arrived, they discovered faint footprints leading to a vent in the corner. It connected directly to the ventilation shafts running throughout the complex, allowing the intruder to watch and listen without ever being seen. The fingerprints lifted from the Polaroids and food packaging all pointed to the same individual, someone who wasn't supposed to exist in the building anymore. Records revealed he was a former maintenance worker dismissed more than 15 years earlier. The discovery turned what began as a missing person search into a chilling revelation that the building itself had been harboring a hidden presence, quietly observing its residents in silence. Fingerprints lifted from the secret room matched a name long forgotten: Harold Finch, a man who once worked as a maintenance employee for the building 15 years earlier. His personnel file described him as quiet, diligent, and skilled with electrical systems. But buried in the old employment records was a troubling note. He had been dismissed after a tenant accused him of entering her apartment without permission. When questioned at the time, Finch denied everything and disappeared before police could investigate further. For over a decade, his name remained nothing more than a footnote in an old complaint file until the fingerprints brought him back into the light. Investigators began piecing together Finch's movements over the years. He had no family, no financial records, and no address listed under his name. It was as though he had vanished completely after losing his job. But a deeper search revealed a series of small cash withdrawals from an old bank account linked to a rural town outside the city. Surveillance from nearby gas stations eventually led them to a single, isolated cabin deep in the woods, surrounded by rusted tools and a half-collapsed shed. The place looked abandoned from the outside, but faint footprints in the dirt and a thin line of smoke curling from the chimney told a different story. When the authorities entered, they found the interior cluttered with notebooks, old building plans, and photographs of the apartment complex. Every apartment was labeled and marked with notes, including the tenants' names and schedules. Among the mess, in a locked back room, they discovered a narrow bed with medical equipment beside it. Lying on the bed was Mia Lang. She was weak, pale, and heavily sedated, hooked up to an IV drip. Nearby were bottles of prescription drugs and a handwritten log tracking her daily care. Finch had written that he was keeping her safe from the dangers of the world above. It was clear he had taken her not out of rage, but out of a warped sense of devotion. Forensic teams confirmed that Finch had been living secretly beneath the apartment building for months before the abduction. He used the old maintenance tunnels and ventilation system to move unseen, installing hidden peepholes behind walls and vents. He had built a network of small pathways connecting unused crawl spaces, giving him access to almost every unit. Residents had occasionally reported strange noises or misplaced items, but no one suspected a human presence beneath them. Finch's disappearance years earlier had been an illusion. He never left. He simply moved underground, turning the building into his hidden world. When police captured him outside the cabin, Finch appeared calm, as if he had expected them all along. He offered no resistance and simply stared blankly as officers escorted him away. Investigators later found evidence linking him to the disappearances of at least 2 former tenants who had vanished years earlier. The discovery of Mia Lang alive exposed not just one man's madness, but the terrifying reality that for years, The tenants had unknowingly shared their homes with a silent observer lurking just beneath their feet. When caught, Finch revealed that he had been protecting his tenants from the world by keeping them in what he called his safe room. To investigators, his confession was unlike anything they had ever heard. He spoke calmly, almost proudly, as if he had done something noble. Finch described his actions not as abductions, but as acts of salvation. He claimed that the world outside was filled with corruption, pain, and cruelty, and that his duty was to preserve purity by sheltering people from it. In his mind, he wasn't a criminal. He was a caretaker, a guardian against a society he no longer trusted. His words revealed a mind fractured by years of isolation and obsession. During interrogation, Finch described how he had watched the building's residents through the vents, choosing the ones he believed were too good for the outside world. He said he waited for them to reach a moment of despair or loneliness, then took them into his safe room, where he promised they would be free from pain. When asked about Mia, Finch claimed she reminded him of someone he had known years before, a tenant who had once shown him kindness when others ignored him. He said Mia needed saving, and that he had waited patiently for the right time to bring her underground. What he didn't realize was that his twisted form of protection had nearly cost her life. Investigators uncovered journals scattered throughout his cabin in the basement, each filled with detailed notes about past tenants. They were written like case studies, describing people's habits, fears, and routines. Some entries mentioned 2 names, women who had lived in the building years earlier and had vanished without a trace. At the time, their disappearances had been labeled voluntary, with police assuming they had left the city to start new lives. But Finch's journals painted a much darker picture. He described them as his first rescues, explaining that they had been too fragile for the world, and that he had released them from suffering. Authorities later found remnants of their belongings in the hidden basement, confirming that they had been his earlier victims. Forensic analysis of the basement showed layers of renovations spanning years. Behind newer walls, investigators found older panels concealing traces of DNA, hair, and blood. It was clear that Finch had rebuilt sections of the room multiple times, each version more sophisticated and better hidden than the last. Every tenant who disappeared marked a new stage in his descent into madness. The discovery turned the case from a missing person investigation into one of the most disturbing serial crimes in the city's history. Mia's rescue finally brought an end to the mystery that had haunted the building for more than a decade. The evidence against Finch was overwhelming, but his confession revealed something far more haunting than guilt. It exposed how delusion can evolve into cruelty when left unchecked. What began as silent observation grew into obsession, and obsession became captivity. The once ordinary apartment building stood as a grim reminder that true danger can exist, not in the shadows of strangers, but within the walls we trust to keep us safe. In May 2025, New York's art community buzzed about a mysterious online exhibit titled The Final Image. The collection appeared overnight on a private gallery website, accessible only by invitation. Each photograph was strikingly composed, hauntingly beautiful, yet disturbingly lifelike. The subjects seemed frozen in moments of fear, their eyes wide and their faces lit by soft, natural light. The exhibit quickly gained attention across social media, with critics calling it the most intimate portrayal of mortality ever captured. But fascination turned to horror when a woman in New Jersey recognized one of the models as her missing sister, a 22-year-old college student who had vanished 3 months earlier. The discovery sent shockwaves through the art world. Authorities immediately launched an investigation, taking down the site and tracing its digital origin. Forensic experts found that the images had been uploaded from multiple encrypted addresses, but all led back to one name, Elias Monroe, a respected yet reclusive photographer known for his unsettlingly emotional portraits. Monroe had once been celebrated for his raw depictions of human vulnerability, but his career declined after a scandal involving a model who accused him of crossing professional boundaries. Since then, he had lived in near isolation, rarely seen in public. detectives obtained a warrant to search Monroe's abandoned studio on the outskirts of Brooklyn. What they found was far more disturbing than anyone expected. The studio was meticulously organized, filled with cameras, lighting rigs, and hundreds of contact sheets covering the walls. Every photo seemed to depict a different person in a state of anguish or fear. Some were recognizable as individuals listed on missing persons reports. Behind a false wall, investigators discovered a narrow staircase leading to a basement that appeared to serve as Monroe's private darkroom. Inside were dozens of rolls of undeveloped film, jars of photographic chemicals, and a digital archive labeled Subjects. When the files were examined, authorities uncovered hundreds of high-resolution images documenting victims' moments before death. Each folder bore the name of a missing person, along with time-stamped notes describing the lighting, emotion, and authenticity of the subject's final expression. Monroe's journals revealed that he believed true art could only exist at the intersection of life and death. He had written that the soul reveals itself when it knows it's being taken. His obsession had evolved into ritual. He lured aspiring models with promises of artistic collaboration, then photographed their fear as he ended their lives. The final breakthrough came when police discovered a locked chamber in the far corner of the basement. Inside was a macabre gallery, prints of the victims displayed on the walls, illuminated by motion sensors that caused the lights to flicker whenever someone entered. Each photograph was accompanied by a handwritten title, often referencing emotion rather than identity: despair, hope, acceptance. It became clear that Monroe had created his own morbid museum, intended only for himself. Elias Monroe was arrested at a small countryside estate 2 days later, attempting to destroy evidence. He offered no resistance, only stating that his art was complete. The case exposed the horrifying truth behind the final image, revealing how one man's pursuit of artistic perfection had crossed into madness. What began as an online sensation ended as one of the most disturbing crimes in modern history, a chilling reminder that beauty and horror can sometimes share the same frame.